They called security on him. The black man standing quietly in the lobby of his own hotel. No threats, no raised voice, no mistake on the reservation. Just skin color. That was enough. Enough for the receptionist to assume he didn't belong. Enough for her to call him a fraud. Enough for the guards to tell him to leave, or they'd call the cops. They didn't know who he was. They didn't care. But they were about to find out. This isn't a story about a misunderstanding. It's a story about what happens when quiet power meets loud prejudice. When the man being humiliated in public turns out to be the one signing your paycheck. And he doesn't lash out. He doesn't shout. He dismantles the system from within. Want to know how it all ends? You'll have to watch to the last second. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments, and what part of this story made your jaw drop. Then hit like, subscribe, and follow, because in this series, justice doesn't knock. It walks straight through the front door. The soft hum of the lobby piano filled the air as the grand double doors of the Regency Fairmont Hotel parted with a quiet whoosh. Morning light filtered through the ornate glass, reflecting off the polished marble floors and casting a gentle glow over the pristine reception desk. Behind it stood Rachel Whitmore, mid-30s, poised, hair pulled tight into a bun, dressed in the hotel's signature navy blazer with gold trim. She stood with the confidence of someone who believed they were the gatekeeper to a world reserved only for a certain kind of guest. As the doorman stepped aside, in walked Marcus Walker, tall, composed, and dressed in a fitted gray suit that complemented his deep brown complexion. Marcus exuded quiet confidence. In his left hand, he rolled a designer leather suitcase. In the other, he held a phone, typing a final message before glancing up at the lobby in mild appreciation. But Rachel didn't see any of that. Her eyes scanned him in a half-second. Skin tone, no flashy jewelry, no visible entourage, no assistant fawning over details, and filed him into a category she had crafted subconsciously over years. Driver, delivery, possibly Uber. Certainly not guest. "Excuse me, sir," she called out with practiced politeness, lifting a manicured hand slightly as he approached. Marcus looked up, briefly surprised that she spoke first. "You'll need to wait outside," she added, the words flowing smoothly from her tongue. "VIP guests are arriving shortly, and the valet area must be kept clear." For a second, Marcus blinked, parsing her tone, firm but laced with something familiar. Assumption. "I'm actually checking in," he said calmly, offering a tight smile. "I have a reservation under Marcus Walker." Rachel hesitated for only a breath. Then, as if the misunderstanding were his fault for not announcing himself with a trumpet or an expensive car, she offered a forced chuckle. "Oh, I see," she said, recovering. "It's just, you're not. Well, never mind. May I see some ID?" The shift was subtle but clear. The smile on her face never quite reached her eyes. She leaned across her desk, clearly not bothering to check the system first. Marcus handed over his ID and credit card. She accepted them with a prim nod but kept glancing behind him, as if a real VIP might walk through the door at any moment. She said as she began typing. Her fingers hovered momentarily above the keyboard before she sighed. "I'm not finding a reservation under this name." Marcus raised a brow. "It was made last week. Should be under Regency Royal Suite." Rachel's eyes flicked up, lips tightening. "The Royal Suite?" She repeated the phrase with faint incredulity, her brows arching before she returned to the screen. "Well, maybe it's under a different name. Who booked it for you?" Marcus straightened slightly, a hint of warmth vanishing from his tone. "I did." There it was again, doubt. A flicker in her expression, the way her lips parted slightly, unsure whether to mask her surprise or double down on her assumptions. "Interesting," she muttered, pretending to recheck. "Sometimes our system glitches. One moment, please." She turned to whisper something to a nearby concierge who glanced briefly at Marcus, then back to Rachel, his expression unreadable. Rachel lowered her voice just enough to seem confidential, but just loud enough for Marcus to hear the tail end of her comment. "He's probably here for someone else." Marcus said nothing. He could have spoken up, corrected her, asserted his position. But he didn't. He only watched. studied. Let her dig. After all, silence often speaks louder than confrontation. Sir, would you mind stepping aside while I investigate this? We're expecting our VIP guest for the royal suite to arrive any moment. I am that guest, Marcus replied, calmly but clearly. Rachel stared at him for a beat too long. Of course, she replied, still unconvinced. Just a moment then. She returned to her terminal, but her eyes flickered toward the doors as a silver Maserati pulled into the driveway. Ah, she said, smiling with relief. This must be the real guest. Her words were careless, unfiltered, spoken as if he weren't standing right in front of her. Marcus heard them, and still he didn't flinch. Outside, a sharply dressed white man exited the car, greeted by bellhops with practiced smiles. Rachel's demeanor transformed. Mr. Lowell, welcome back to the Regency Fairmont, she said, stepping away from her station. She rushed to greet the man personally. Your suite is ready as always. Marcus turned slightly, watching the display. Mr. Lowell offered a casual smile, clearly used to the attention. Rachel's voice lowered into syrupy tones as she led him personally to the express elevator. Minutes passed. Rachel returned to the desk, her smile fading when she saw Marcus still standing there. I thought I asked you to wait outside, she said, slightly flustered. You did, Marcus replied, but I figured I'd wait until you remembered who actually paid for the marble floor you're standing on. She frowned. Excuse me. Reservation under Marcus Walker, he said again. Check it. This time she looked. Her eyes scanned the system, and there it was, Marcus A. Walker, CEO, Regency Royal Suite, 3 nights. VIP notation, Platinum Client. Her face paled. She swallowed once slowly. My apologies, Mr. Walker, she said, but the words lacked sincerity. There must have been a system delay, or a perception problem, he said evenly. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He checked it briefly, then nodded to her. I'll wait for the general manager to meet me here. I think a conversation is due. She stiffened, forcing a smile. Of course. Right away. As Marcus took a seat in the executive lounge nearby, he pulled out his phone, sent a message, then crossed one leg over the other. Calm, composed, and still watching. Rachel stared at the computer screen as if it had betrayed her. The name glared back in bold text, Marcus A. Walker, Regency Royal Suite check-in. Today, there was no mistake, no glitch, no misplaced reservation to fall back on. Her fingers froze on the keyboard, her composure visibly cracking for the first time since Marcus had walked in. A part of her wanted to delete the entry, to will it away, to make it fit the version of reality she had constructed from the moment she saw him walk through those lobby doors. Instead, she picked up the phone, dialed an internal number, and spoke in hushed, urgent tones. Paul, she said, voice low but tense. Can you come to the front desk? There's a situation with a potential fraud attempt on a suite reservation. Her tone wasn't uncertain. It was deliberately phrased to trigger protocol. She hung up before Marcus could respond. One moment, Mr. Walker, she said stiffly, avoiding eye contact now. Our general manager will be here shortly. Marcus leaned slightly on the counter, expression unreadable. So now I'm a fraud? He asked, his voice still calm but laced with steel. Rachel didn't reply. Instead, she turned toward the elevator again as another guest approached. This time, it was a middle-aged white man, casually dressed in slacks and a collared shirt, dragging a beat-up suitcase behind him. He looked tired, slightly unkempt, but familiar. Mr. Harmon. Rachel's voice changed instantly, bright, chirpy, warm. She stepped from behind the desk and walked over with a beaming smile. It's so good to have you back with us. You've been upgraded to the royal suite as usual. Thanks, Harmon said, barely glancing around. I booked this morning. Had a last-minute change. Of course, Rachel said sweetly, already pulling a key card from the drawer. You're one of our loyal Diamond members. We always try to keep your preferences in mind. Without so much as checking the computer, she handed him the key. Marcus watched this unfold, his jaw tightening ever so slightly. Rachel walked Mr. Harmon to the elevator, making small talk about the weather and weekend plans, completely ignoring the man she had just accused of lying. When she returned, Marcus was still at the desk. She didn't speak right away, instead pretending to look busy as her manager approached. Paul Harrington was in his late 40s, stocky, with a salt and pepper beard and a deep furrow between his brows that made him look perpetually concerned. "Rachel?" he asked, glancing between her and Marcus. "What's the issue?" Rachel straightened immediately, professionalism snapping back into place. "I flagged a suspicious reservation for the Royal Suite. The guest claims to be Marcus Walker, but the system didn't initially display his name. It's showing now, but I thought you should confirm it." Paul turned to Marcus. "Sir, do you have identification?" Marcus didn't flinch. He slid his ID and credit card across the desk again. Paul picked them up, examined them, then turned to the screen Rachel had been working on. Within seconds, his eyes widened slightly as he verified the details. "This reservation is valid," he said plainly. "Everything matches. VIP status, platinum flag, prepaid. There's no issue here." Rachel's posture stiffened, but she said nothing. Paul looked at her, then back at Marcus. "Mr. Walker, my apologies for the delay. There seems to have been a miscommunication on our part." Marcus tilted his head, studying Rachel, then met Paul's eyes. "It wasn't a miscommunication," he said. "It was judgment." Paul's face tightened. "Understood. I'll handle it personally from here." Rachel's hands clutched the edge of the desk. She didn't argue. She didn't speak. She just stood there as Paul printed Marcus's key card and handed it to him. "Your suite is on the top floor," he said. "Private elevator, city view, as requested. If there's anything else you need, don't hesitate." "There is," Marcus said quietly. "I'd like your internal review team to follow up on what just happened here. This isn't about inconvenience, it's about culture." Paul nodded slowly, a flicker of discomfort flashing across his face. "Understood." Marcus took the card, nodded once, and turned to walk away, but Rachel called after him. "Mr. Walker?" He turned, pausing with his hand on the leather strap of his suitcase. She hesitated. "I didn't mean to cause offense. Sometimes the system didn't fail," he said sharply, his tone still controlled but colder now. "You did." She froze. Around them, the lobby had quieted. A couple of guests standing in line were watching now, shifting awkwardly as they sensed tension. One of them, a young man in business attire, whispered to his partner, "He's the CEO, isn't he? I think I saw him in Forbes." Marcus didn't stay to confirm. He walked toward the private elevator, but the sting of public humiliation didn't fade with his departure. Rachel stood behind the desk, still trying to process what had just happened. She glanced over at the key inventory system. Harmon's suite had updated. The Royal Suite, the one booked by Marcus. Her breath caught as she realized what she had done. She had given the room reserved for the CEO to another guest simply because it fit her expectations better. And now she had nothing to hide behind, no policy, no glitch, no backup excuse. Just her own bias, exposed in the most public way possible. Behind her, Paul was already making calls. From the tone of his voice, this wouldn't end here. Rachel reached for the edge of the desk to steady herself. The next guest in line stepped forward, but Rachel didn't notice. Her world had just shifted, and for the first time, she didn't know where she stood in it anymore. But before anything could be said, her intercom buzzed again. It was security, asking if the VIP complaint needed escalation. Rachel didn't answer right away, because somewhere deep inside, for the first time, she realized. Marcus stood in the private elevator, his thumb gently tapping the keycard he'd just been handed, but he hadn't pressed the button yet. His mind raced not with anger, but with purpose. The situation hadn't just been inconvenient. It had been a deliberate act of discrimination veiled under policy. He took a deep breath, turned, and stepped back into the lobby, just as Paul disappeared down the executive corridor. Rachel was still at the front desk, head down, pretending to study something on her screen, but the slight twitch of her fingers gave her away. She could feel him watching her. "Miss Whitmore," Marcus said, calm but firm. Rachel looked up, startled, as if he'd no right to address her again. "Yes, Mr. Walker," she replied, her voice clipped brittle. "I'd like to speak with the hotel's regional director, not just the general manager." Her brow furrowed, and she tilted her head in practiced confusion. "I'm not sure that's necessary, sir. The matter's been resolved, hasn't it?" "No," Marcus said, sharper now. "It's just begun." Rachel's eyes darted to the side, toward the guest queue now forming behind him. "Sir," she began, raising her voice just slightly, "I understand you're upset, but I must ask that you don't cause a scene. We do have other guests checking in." Her tone was composed for the guest to hear, but the look in her eyes was a quiet warning. Marcus didn't back down. "Do you think calmly requesting accountability is causing scene?" he asked. "Because if you do, maybe that says more about you than it does about me." Rachel leaned forward slightly, pressing the intercom button hidden beneath the desk. Her voice softened, but it was rehearsed, slippery. "Security to the front desk, please. We have a disturbance in the lobby." Marcus heard the words, and so did the couple behind him. The older woman gently tapped her husband's arm, whispering something too soft to catch, but her eyes lingered on Marcus, as though she couldn't decide if he was trouble or being wronged. Moments later, a pair of uniformed security guards entered the lobby from the west wing, boots echoing against the marble like a slow drumbeat. They were tall, white, both built like linebackers, and both with eyes that went straight to Marcus, bypassing Rachel entirely. The taller one stepped forward. "Sir," he said, his tone not unfriendly, but not negotiable either, "we're going to have to ask you to leave the premises." Marcus didn't move. "Did you speak to the manager before coming here?" he asked. The man hesitated, glancing briefly at Rachel, who nodded ever so slightly behind her desk. "We received a report of an aggressive guest refusing to cooperate," the guard replied. "Policy requires us to de-escalate situations like this before they become unsafe." "Unsafe," Marcus repeated, the word tasting bitter. "I've raised my voice to no one. I've threatened no one. All I did was request to speak with someone above the woman who violated my rights and my dignity. And you call that unsafe?" The second guard stepped closer. "We're just following protocol, sir. Please collect your belongings and exit the hotel." "Or what?" Marcus asked, voice low now, razor sharp. "Or we'll be forced to contact the authorities," the taller one said. A collective hush fell over the lobby. The young couple by the windows froze mid-conversation. A businessman near the coffee station lowered his paper. It wasn't just a confrontation anymore, it was spectacle. Marcus slowly turned to face the growing crowd, his posture tall, composed, his expression unreadable. "Is this what this place stands for?" he asked, voice raised just enough to carry. "Do you call the police on your platinum guests when they ask for justice?" Rachel stiffened behind the desk. She hadn't expected it to escalate quite like this. Not publicly, not with people watching. But it was too late to undo. The guards looked uncomfortable now. One of them tapped his radio. "Dispatch, stand by for potential contact. Guest is refusing to leave." "I'm not refusing," Marcus said, stepping aside and placing his key card on the edge of the reception desk. "I'm inviting clarity, transparency, responsibility. If that's too much for this hotel, then maybe the wrong person is being asked to leave." Just then, Paul returned to the lobby, carrying a folder. He stopped mid-stride when he saw the standoff unfolding. "What's going on?" he demanded, striding forward. Rachel spoke quickly. "I asked for security because Mr. Walker was making the guests uncomfortable." Paul's eyes snapped to Marcus. "Mr. Walker, is that true?" "I asked to speak with the regional director," Marcus replied coolly. "And she called security." Paul turned slowly toward Rachel, his face darkening. "You called security on the guest, whose suite you reassigned without permission?" "He wouldn't calm down," Rachel stammered. "I followed policy, you followed prejudice," Paul interrupted, voice sharp. "Guards, stand down." The security team exchanged glances and slowly backed away, tension still clinging to their movements. Marcus didn't speak. His silence now was more powerful than any outburst. Paul exhaled, then faced Marcus directly. "Sir, I understand your frustration. I'll ensure this is handled internally and that the director contacts you within the hour." Marcus gave a short nod. Good. Because if I walk out of here without that call, you'll be hearing from more than just your director. Paul nodded grimly. Understood. He turned to Rachel. We'll talk in my office. Now, her face flushed red, but she followed him without a word. The lobby remained tense, the air too quiet, too charged. Guests began murmuring again, their curiosity no longer disguised. Marcus picked up the keycard he had deliberately left behind, turned it over in his hand, then walked toward the elevator once more, though not because he'd been told to move. This time he chose it, not out of retreat, but for control. As the elevator doors opened, he stepped inside, alone, and pressed the top floor button with a single touch. The brass doors closed silently around him, leaving behind a lobby still rippling from the moment it had just witnessed. But even as the numbers ticked upward, something about Rachel's final look didn't sit right. She hadn't looked ashamed. She had looked calculating, like someone still holding on to some sense of superiority, as if she were bracing for something else. And Marcus knew. The elevator doors hadn't even fully closed before Rachel re-emerged into the lobby, her heels clicking sharply across the marble floor like a metronome counting down her patience. Her face was flushed not just with embarrassment, but with indignation, and behind her eyes burned the kind of pride that couldn't accept being corrected publicly, especially by someone she had already decided was beneath her. As Paul retreated to his office to make the promised call to corporate, Rachel stayed behind under the guise of managing the lobby, but every movement she made, every glance, every clipped tone, carried an edge sharpened by humiliation. Marcus had humiliated her, she believed, not by shouting or being aggressive, but by simply existing in contradiction to her assumptions. That contradiction was now eating her alive. As another group of guests wheeled their luggage across the check-in line, Rachel took a long breath, then stepped away from the desk and turned toward a pair of guests sitting nearby. A middle-aged woman sipping espresso, and a man beside her reading a newspaper. I apologize for the earlier disruption, Rachel said, her voice loud and crisp, carefully projected so it would carry across the marble and hit every curious ear in the vicinity. Unfortunately, we've had an issue with someone impersonating a high-level guest in order to receive complimentary accommodations. Her words hung in the air like a slow leak of poison. Several heads turned, eyebrows lifted. The woman with the espresso paused mid-sip. Of course, Rachel continued, placing a hand delicately over her chest. Our staff handled it professionally. But some individuals believe raising their voice and threatening lawsuits will magically turn them into CEOs. Her tone was one of thinly veiled disdain, her smile polite but condescending, as if she were educating the crowd on how the elite truly behaved. The newspaper crinkled as the man behind it lowered the pages, his frown tightening. He said he was Marcus Walker, Rachel added, a subtle scoff folding into her words. But the real Mr. Walker doesn't travel alone or in silence. Across the room, a young woman with auburn curls and a tablet bag slung across her shoulder stood near the concierge desk, phone halfway out of her pocket. Her name was Talia Freeman, a travel vlogger who'd built a solid following documenting hotel service and luxury experience reviews, and she had a knack for spotting red flags in customer service. This wasn't just a flag, this was a wildfire. She tapped her screen, camera now recording, and started quietly narrating. So, I'm standing in the lobby of the Regency Fairmont, she said into her mic, voice low but clear. I just witnessed a black man, very calm, well-dressed, get confronted by two security guards, told to leave the hotel, only for the manager to confirm he had a legitimate VIP reservation. Now the front desk clerk is telling everyone he was pretending to be someone else. Behind Talia, Rachel continued her subtle character assassination, now turning to another guest who had wandered over. You'd be amazed how often people try to pose as important figures, Rachel said with a soft chuckle, especially these days. It's becoming a real issue in the luxury hospitality industry. Talia narrowed her eyes and flipped her camera view. She quietly focused on Rachel and began live streaming, her followers already sending reactions and comments. This is unreal. Wait, she's actually saying that out loud. Name and shame her, Talia. As Rachel continued talking, Oblivious to the fact she was now live to nearly 20,000 viewers, her words grew bolder. "It's always the same story," she said. "They show up with a story, demand top service, and when things don't go their way, suddenly they're victims. I mean, who books a $2,000 a night suite and comes in dragging their own suitcase?" Laughter from a nearby guest emboldened her, though it was nervous, shallow. Others weren't as amused. The espresso-drinking woman placed her cup down with a gentle clink and crossed her arms. The man with the newspaper now sat forward, watching her intently. "And then he tried to reverse the whole thing," Rachel continued, playing the race card, saying we were targeting him. She rolled her eyes as if the suggestion itself were laughable. "But what he didn't expect," she added with a smug smile, "is that we got policies, checks, and real VIP profiles that don't lie." At that, Talia stopped recording and switched to her front camera. "I just want everyone watching this to remember," she said softly. "This woman is speaking about a guest who had a confirmed reservation, was verified by management, and treated like a criminal. This is what covert discrimination looks like in 2025. She glanced up. Rachel had noticed her now. Their eyes met across the polished lobby. Rachel's brow furrowed as if trying to place her. "Is there a problem, ma'am?" she asked, the polite veneer snapping back in place. "Actually, yes," Talia replied, raising her phone slightly. "I'd love to know if your hotel trains its staff to speak about guests that way in public." Rachel's expression faltered. "Excuse me." "I've been recording," Talia said flatly. "And live streaming. Thousands of people just heard every word you said about Mr. Marcus Walker, the CEO of Walker International Holdings." The hush that followed felt different this time, heavier, sharper. Rachel's face blanched. "You were live streaming?" "Every second," Talia confirmed. "And your management's going to have a lot of explaining to do." For the first time, Rachel looked truly uncertain. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. A concierge appeared behind her, whispering something into her ear. Her face turned a deeper shade of red with every word. Talia stepped back toward the velvet lounge seating and quietly ended the stream. Her phone was already buzzing with notifications, media DMs, reposts. The story was out now. She didn't need to say anything else. The truth would speak for itself. But even as the guests around them began murmuring louder, even as the weight of Rachel's words began catching up to her in real time, Marcus, still upstairs, had no idea how fast the storm was building beneath him, or how far it was about to reach. By the time Paul emerged from his office, the atmosphere in the lobby had shifted into a dense, uncomfortable silence, broken only by the occasional ping from phones and the whispering tension of curious guests. He had just gotten off a call with the regional director, who had, in fact, confirmed that Marcus Walker was not only a platinum-tier client, but also one of the group's most powerful stakeholders. The director's tone had been clipped urgent and filled with phrases like public incident, reputation management, and legal exposure. Paul didn't need further explanation to know the gravity of the situation. As he walked briskly toward the front desk, he saw Rachel standing stiffly, her face pale, lips pressed into a tight line. The moment she saw Paul approaching, her entire demeanor transformed. Her posture sank just slightly, and her expression collapsed into a trembling mask of wounded vulnerability. Her hand darted up to brush her cheek, as if wiping away a tear that might not have been there. "Paul," she said shakily, her voice low and choked. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Paul didn't respond right away. He folded his arms and waited. Rachel continued, eyes now shimmering with carefully manufactured distress. "I was just following protocol. I didn't know who he was. I swear. The system wasn't showing his name at first, and I thought it was another one of those situations. We've had incidents, you know." "Incidents," Paul repeated flatly, his tone unreadable. "Yes," Rachel nodded quickly, eyes darting to the other staff now watching quietly from their corners. People pretending to be executives to scam high-end bookings. "And I know it sounds awful, but he just didn't fit the profile. I panicked. I thought I was protecting the hotel." Her voice cracked near the end of the sentence, and she bit her lip as if holding back a full emotional breakdown. Paul looked at her for a long, silent moment. Then he said, You told half the lobby he was impersonating someone. You called security on a verified guest. You reassigned his room. And you publicly humiliated him while live streamers were recording. Rachel sniffled, nodding slowly. I know how it looks. But I didn't mean to target anyone. I swear I didn't. I was just trying to follow the rules. She reached into her blazer pocket for a tissue, dramatically dabbing at her eyes. Paul remained expressionless, though inside he could feel his patience being chipped away. You didn't mean to target anyone, he repeated. But you referred to Mr. Walker as playing the race card, in public. That was taken out of context, she blurted. You weren't here. You didn't hear how aggressive he was being. He never raised his voice. Paul interrupted. I was here for that part. Rachel faltered. The tears weren't coming fast enough anymore. She lowered her voice again, leaning in. Paul, please, she whispered. I've worked here for 8 years. I've never had a complaint on record. You know me. This is all just a big misunderstanding. Paul shook his head, but before he could say more, Rachel's phone buzzed in her pocket. She flinched, then quickly pulled it out, thumb brushing across the screen. Her eyes darted up briefly, then back down. A faint smirk tugged at the corner of her mouth, almost imperceptible. When Paul turned to speak to another guest who had approached with a question, Rachel seized the moment. With practiced ease, she tilted her phone toward the elevator, Marcus's suite floor now displayed on the digital directory, and zoomed in. The camera captured the top floor indicator, the private elevator panel, and a blurred image of Marcus stepping out. She tapped once. Click. Then she opened the hotel's internal messaging app, a staff-only group chat titled Level 6, Real Talk. Within it, a stream of casual messages flowed throughout the day, most lighthearted, a few sarcastic. But this message stood out. Rachel typed quickly, her thumbs moving with disturbing fluency. Another black guy pretending to be a CEO. These people are really good at acting. She added the photo, hit send, then locked the screen just as Paul turned back toward her. Rachel, he said quietly, I'm putting you on temporary leave pending investigation. She froze, then faked another gasp, pressing her hand to her chest. Paul, please, this is my career. This can ruin everything I've worked for. You should have thought about that before you started assigning status based on skin tone, Paul said, then gestured toward the hallway. Now go home. HR will contact you by noon tomorrow. Rachel opened her mouth again, but Paul cut her off. I don't want to hear another word. The words hit her like a slap. Her mouth closed. She stood there for a second, utterly still, the fake tremble in her hands suddenly very real. Then, with a stiff nod, she gathered her things and walked toward the back hallway. Her heels no longer clicked with confidence. They dragged. The staff avoided eye contact as she passed, and even the bellhop, who usually greeted her with friendly banter, said nothing. Upstairs, Marcus stood on the balcony of his suite, sipping a glass of water, phone in hand, now catching up with a flood of notifications pouring in. Someone had sent him a link to the live stream. Another forwarded screenshots. The hashtags were already trending. And as he scrolled, he came across a message from a familiar name, one of the junior concierge assistants he had met during a past stay. It simply read, "You need to see what's being said about you in the staff chat." Someone leaked a screenshot. Marcus narrowed his eyes, thumb hovering over the image. He tapped. The photo loaded, and in it, a grainy zoomed-in shot of himself stepping from the elevator, captioned in cruel, mocking words that cut sharper than any direct insult. He didn't move. His jaw tightened. The glass in his hand stopped midair. He stared at the screen for a long, quiet moment. And then, without a word, he turned back inside, sat down at the edge of the massive king-size bed, and began typing a message to his executive assistant, a message that would trigger a chain reaction reaching far beyond the front desk. Marcus sat in silence for nearly a full minute, the screenshot still glowing on his phone, the grotesque message glaring at him like a wound reopened. The hotel's opulent suite, with its floor-to-ceiling windows, custom Italian furnishings, and curated welcome gifts, suddenly felt like a gilded shell, hollow, cold, and undeserved. This place, built to exude prestige and respect, had just revealed its rot. He exhaled once, then stood, calm and controlled, like a man about to execute a carefully planned maneuver. He slipped on his suit jacket, straightened the cuffs, and checked his reflection, not out of vanity, but to make sure he looked exactly as composed as he felt inside. Then he picked up his phone, scrolled to a name simply labeled Boardline Direct, and hit call. As the line connected, he walked slowly toward the elevator, pressing the button for the lobby without urgency, letting the descending numbers match the weight he was about to drop. "This is Marcus Walker," he said evenly into the receiver as the elevator hummed downward. "Code Gray, Regency Fairmont. Full stop. I want the property temporarily suspended for a 24-hour compliance audit. Notify risk, legal, and corporate affairs. No guests are to be checked in past noon. No staff changes without executive authorization." There was a pause on the other end. Then the voice responded briskly. "Understood, Mr. Walker. Initiating immediate protocol. Confirmation within 20 minutes." The elevator chimed as it reached the lobby. Marcus didn't hang up. He simply said, "I'll be downstairs," and ended the call. The doors opened to a now-changed lobby. Guests were quieter, glancing around as whispers of the incident spread. Talia, the vlogger, was seated on a velvet couch, phone in hand, still monitoring her growing feed of comments. Rachel was nowhere to be seen. Paul stood near the concierge desk, talking with another manager, his expression worn and distracted. The moment he saw Marcus approach, he stepped forward, trying to reclaim some semblance of control. "Mr. Walker," he began, "I spoke with corporate, and we're launching an internal review immediately. The staff member responsible has been suspended." "I know," Marcus interrupted, his voice steady but devoid of warmth. "And this is no longer just an internal review. I've ordered a 24-hour operational halt." Paul blinked. "A what?" "Effective in 20 minutes, Marcus said, holding up his phone. "No check-ins, no checkouts beyond what's essential, no shift changes. This hotel will pause all guest-facing activity until an independent audit is complete." Paul's lips parted, but no words came out. "You can't just," he started, but the tone in Marcus's voice stopped him. "Yes, I can," Marcus said, enunciating each word slowly, deliberately. "And I have. You're speaking to the chairman of Walker International Group, the majority stakeholder in the Horizon Hospitality Consortium, which owns the Regency brand." The silence that followed was immediate and deep. The other manager beside Paul took a step back, visibly shaken. A few feet away, the concierge's fingers froze mid-typing on the terminal. The truth settled over the room like a crashing wave, drowning every assumption, every whisper, every judgment that had preceded it. Paul's face drained of color. "Mr. Walker," he said again, this time softer, almost pleading. "Had I known, you'd have acted differently?" Marcus asked, his gaze locked on him. "You'd have treated me with respect not because it was the right thing, but because of my title?" Paul opened his mouth, but couldn't find the right answer. "The problem," Marcus continued, "is that this place runs on perception, not principle. And that's why it needs to stop. Right now." Behind them, the front doors opened, and two suited individuals stepped in, compliance officers dispatched from the nearby regional office, faster than anyone in the room had anticipated. One of them nodded to Marcus, then spoke into a walkie. "Operation freeze confirmed. Beginning preliminary staff interviews." Paul stepped aside, stunned, as the officers moved past him. Marcus turned his attention to the guests now gathering nearby. "To anyone who's been delayed or unsettled by what's happened today," he said clearly, "I apologize on behalf of a company that should have done better. I will personally see to it that every inconvenience is addressed, and that no voice goes unheard." The guests nodded, murmurs of approval rising slowly. Talia stood and began recording again, now framing Marcus with a different lens, not just the victim of profiling, but the executor of corporate justice. Meanwhile, behind the check-in desk, another staff member discreetly pulled out her phone and checked the group chat Rachel had posted in earlier. But the message was gone, deleted. Only the screenshot sent to Marcus remained. And now, copies were being sent to legal. Upstairs, Rachel paced the employee lounge, unaware of the unfolding storm. She had seen Paul's face when he walked away, and she thought, naively, that maybe the worst had passed. Maybe she'd get a formal reprimand, maybe a few uncomfortable days, but she had survived worse. She still believed, somehow, that she controlled the narrative. That belief cracked when she saw two compliance officers enter the employee wing. They carried clipboards, wore expressionless stares, and moved with the precision of people whose only job was to uncover hidden rot. Rachel Whitmore, one of them, asked. She nodded slowly, her throat suddenly dry. "We'll need to speak with you," the officer said. "Now." "I was told I could go home," she stammered. "That's changed," he replied. "We've been instructed to conduct interviews immediately regarding alleged misconduct and racially motivated behavior against a high-profile guest. Your name has been cited in a formal complaint." Her knees nearly gave. "A formal complaint from who?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The officer didn't answer. Instead, he turned and led her toward a conference room, leaving her to follow with legs that suddenly felt like they were sinking into the floor. Downstairs, Marcus checked his watch. Exactly 18 minutes had passed. His phone buzzed with a confirmation message. All systems paused. Site lockdown initiated. Awaiting further instruction. He nodded, slipped the device into his pocket, and began walking toward the private lounge. As he passed Paul, he paused. "Do you know what hurts the most?" he asked quietly. Paul looked up, eyes wide with guilt. Marcus didn't wait for an answer. "It's not what she said. It's that nobody stopped her." Marcus stood quietly at the edge of the executive lounge, his gaze fixed on the grand chandelier that hung like a frozen storm over the hotel lobby. It sparkled without knowing the fire beneath it. His fingers drummed slowly against the armrest of a sleek leather chair as he mentally reviewed the next move, not for revenge, but for reckoning. Just across the marble expanse, guests whispered, staff avoided eye contact, and the weight of what had transpired still hummed in the air like a distant drumbeat. He rose without a word, adjusted his jacket, and walked to the center of the lobby. With a single nod to one of the compliance officers, a short command was issued through the internal PA system, a voice echoing calmly but firmly. All on-duty staff are to report to the main lobby immediately for a mandatory operational debrief. Attendance is not optional. The announcement sent an electric ripple through the building. Doors opened. Footsteps shuffled. From the back halls and executive levels, housekeepers emerged still in uniform. Concierge agents tucked their tablets away. Bartenders paused mid-polish of glassware, and room attendants set down trays mid-delivery. In under 5 minutes, the front of the hotel had transformed into a staff assembly, dozens of employees forming a wide, cautious semicircle around the guest lounge as Marcus stepped forward. He stood alone, no clipboard, no notes, just presence. Every face turned toward him, some filled with concern, some with shame, others unreadable. Paul stood to one side, arms folded tightly, flanked by the regional officers who now observed the room like quiet sentinels. "Before we begin," Marcus said, voice calm but resonant, "I want to be very clear. This isn't just about one person, one incident, or one mistake. This is about a culture, a way of seeing people, of treating them, that has been tolerated for too long under the excuse of discretion and standards." The staff said nothing. Many lowered their eyes. "This morning, I checked in under my name, Marcus Walker," he continued. "No fanfare, no entourage, just me. And yet I was stopped, questioned, accused, humiliated, and insulted. Not because of a policy, not because of a glitch, but because of how I looked." Behind the line of employees, a single figure stood stiff and unmoving. Rachel Whitmore, arms crossed, chin lifted high. She hadn't expected to be called down for this. She hadn't wanted to face what she assumed was a grandstanding performance. But she had come, barely. Marcus turned toward her without needing to name her. "And when I asked for clarification, I was met with security," he said. "When I asked for transparency, I was met with suspicion. When I showed proof, I was still met with doubt. And when the truth came out, He paused, letting the silence stretch. I was mocked in a staff group chat, called a fraud, called a fake, called less than human. A few staff shifted uncomfortably, whispers rising again, the gravity of the moment setting in. So here's what's going to happen, Marcus said. We are pressing pause. This hotel is closed to the public until further notice. And every single person who worked this morning will participate in a cultural bias audit and behavioral assessment. All of you will be interviewed. No one is exempt. Because if we're going to build trust again, it starts right here with the truth. A murmur moved through the crowd, but no one spoke above it. Then, suddenly, Rachel stepped forward. Her voice cut the air like a blade. I won't participate in this charade, she said coldly. I did my job. I followed the same procedures I've followed for years. You can fire me, blacklist me, whatever you want, but I don't take orders from people like you. The gasp that followed her words was not theatrical. It was instinctive, visceral. Even those who had kept their heads low looked up now, shocked into stillness. Paul's jaw clenched. Talia Freeman, standing with her camera off to the side, audibly exhaled. Marcus didn't flinch. He turned slowly, facing Rachel directly. People like me, he repeated, voice soft but commanding. Is that what this is about for you, Rachel? Because if you truly believe that, then let me save you the trouble. He took a step forward, never raising his voice. You're right. You won't serve people like me. Because as of this moment, you no longer work here. Rachel's breath caught. Her posture faltered for the first time. What? She whispered. Marcus nodded once toward Paul. Effective immediately. Her access is revoked. HR will finalize separation papers today. Rachel turned to Paul, but he didn't look at her. Then to the compliance officers, but their expressions were unreadable. You can't do this, she said, louder now, her voice rising to a bitter edge. You're just one person. I'm the owner of this building, Marcus interrupted. I'm the chairman of the board that signs your paychecks. And I'm the man you humiliated without a shred of remorse. I didn't know who you were, she snapped. That's exactly the problem, Marcus said. You didn't care to. The room was silent again. No applause, no cheers, just the soft hum of air vents and the subtle scrape of shoes shifting uneasily on polished floors. Rachel turned, her expression twisted with disbelief, then stormed through the lobby doors without looking back. The staff parted in silence as she passed. Marcus turned back to the group. This isn't just her issue. It's all of ours. And it's time we fixed it. As the heavy glass doors closed behind Rachel, a tense stillness lingered like fog in the lobby. The staff stood motionless, some still processing the scene they had just witnessed, others struggling to maintain their composure as the weight of the moment pressed in from all sides. Marcus remained at the center, not triumphant, not angry, just resolute. His calm radiated not from pride, but from purpose. He took one breath, then looked around the semicircle of staff, making eye contact with as many of them as he could. I know some of you may be wondering why I didn't step in sooner, he said, his voice low and measured. Why I let it escalate. Why I didn't stop it when it was just an insult or a misstep. No one answered. A few heads shook subtly. Most just waited, sensing something deeper was about to unfold. What happened here this morning wasn't an anomaly, Marcus continued. It wasn't just one person's prejudice. It was a symptom of a deeper failure, one that goes beyond training manuals and mission statements. And if I had stepped in immediately, if I had flashed a title or called a press conference, maybe this whole thing would have been swept under the rug like it never happened. He paused. But I needed to see. I needed to know what happens when no one's watching, when no one thinks they're being tested. Now the staff began to shift more noticeably, tension rising in their expressions, realization beginning to bloom. Marcus straightened his jacket. The truth is, this wasn't just a stay. It was an audit. A blind check of the company culture we claim to protect. And I chose this location because it had high ratings, high turnover, and recent complaints buried in employee surveys that were never escalated. Paul's eyes widened slowly, his shoulders dropping under the invisible weight of that confirmation. This property, Marcus said, gesturing around, the Regency Fairmont. It belongs to Walker International. It was acquired 2 years ago under our equity portfolio through Horizon Holdings. That means the chairs you're standing on, the uniforms you wear, the systems you log into, all of it operates under the standards we created. And today, you showed me exactly where those standards are failing. One of the younger receptionists gasped softly. Another, a housekeeper near the rear of the crowd, brought a hand to her mouth. A quiet buzz moved through the staff like electricity running through a wire. For those of you who treated me with kindness, with professionalism, even when you didn't know who I was, I saw that too, Marcus added. And it won't go unnoticed. But we will be rebuilding this culture from the ground up. Starting now. From the corner of the lobby, Talia Freeman stepped forward. She had stopped recording the moment Rachel was dismissed, but her phone had continued buzzing in her pocket nonstop. Now, with the weight of the moment reaching a crescendo, she cleared her throat and held up her phone. "Mr. Walker," she said with a slight smile, "I think you should know. Your message is already being heard." She turned the screen toward the crowd. The video she had streamed, the one capturing Rachel's public statements, had already been clipped, re-uploaded, and was trending across several platforms. The hashtag Walker Audit was climbing fast, sitting at number 3 in live trending searches. The comment section was exploding with outrage, support, and widespread media attention. Influencers, CEOs, and even public figures had begun quoting lines from Marcus's impromptu speech. "You're speaking to the chairman" had already become a rallying cry in captions and tweets. Marcus raised an eyebrow, the faintest smirk touching the corner of his lips. "That fast?" he asked. Talia nodded. 30 minutes, tops. This is going global." Paul glanced at her screen, face going pale again. "Is that footage of everything?" Talia confirmed. "From the front desk to the confrontation to your speech. It's out there. And judging by the comments, people aren't waiting for a press release." "Good," Marcus said simply. "Let it be seen." He turned back to the staff. Because what happens in these lobbies, these quiet micro-moments of judgment or grace, is exactly what defines our brand in the real world. And the world is watching now. A junior bellhop raised his hand timidly. "Sir, what happens next?" Marcus looked at him with a kind, steady gaze. "We rebuild," he said, "with truth, with accountability, with people who care." Another compliance officer stepped forward, handing Marcus a tablet displaying a rapidly updating dashboard. Social sentiment charts, media mentions, internal HR alerts now popping up like embers catching fire. He skimmed it, then passed the tablet back. "We'll keep the hotel closed through tomorrow. After that, no department resumes operation without completing new equity and ethics certification." "That's going to take weeks," Paul said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. "Maybe," Marcus replied. "But reputation takes years to earn, and seconds to lose." His words landed like a final stamp, calm, irrevocable, firm. Talia stepped aside to take a call, an incoming interview request from a major media outlet. Other guests in the lobby began clapping softly, then louder. It wasn't a celebration, it was something closer to respect, recognition that something real had just unfolded in front of them. Marcus didn't acknowledge the applause. He wasn't here for approval. He was here for change. Still, somewhere in the distance, as if carried by the building itself, came the faint buzz of another phone. A new post climbing the charts, a news alert flashing red, a company reputation being rewritten in real time. And as Marcus stood there, surrounded by stunned staff, blinking guests, and echoing silence, he knew. Less than an hour after Marcus's identity had been publicly confirmed and his ownership of the Regency Fairmont made viral headlines, the corporate legal team arrived on site. They didn't announce themselves loudly, but their tailored suits and clipped tones carried the unmistakable weight of executive authority. Accompanied by a representative from Human Resources and 2 advisors from the Diversity and Ethics Office, they moved quickly, like a unit with a pre-written playbook for high-profile crises. Their first stop wasn't the general manager's office. It was the Security Command Center. Surveillance footage was reviewed, timestamps verified, audio extracted. Within 15 minutes, a full timeline of the incident had been reconstructed with indisputable clarity. Rachel's discriminatory comments, the unnecessary security escalation, and Paul's failure to verify information before threatening to remove a guest. All of it documented in HD clarity. Downstairs, Marcus remained in the lobby, fielding a steady stream of incoming messages and press requests, but his attention remained on the staff present. Several employees had quietly approached him since the gathering, some offering apologies, others sharing that they'd witnessed similar behavior in the past, but had felt powerless to act. Marcus had listened to every story. He took no notes. He simply remembered. At precisely 3:04 p.m., Rachel received a call from the HR director's assistant. She was asked to return to the hotel immediately, despite her previous instructions to go home. She resisted at first, demanding to know if her position was being reconsidered, but the assistant gave no answer. When she arrived 20 minutes later, the atmosphere inside the employee entrance had changed. A compliance officer met her at the threshold, took her badge, and escorted her to a small glass-walled room on the mezzanine level. The HR director was already waiting. "Rachel Whitmore," the director began, her tone cool but professional. "This meeting serves as your official termination from Horizon Hospitality, effective immediately. Your conduct earlier today was in direct violation of our company's core ethics policy, equal service standards, and anti-discrimination clauses outlined in the employee handbook you signed upon employment." Rachel stood still, her face flushed with confusion and disbelief. "You can't just fire me over one misunderstanding," she said. "You've seen the footage," the director replied, gesturing toward the printed report on the desk. "Multiple verified guest statements, staff testimony, internal chat screenshots, and publicly circulated video recordings support the decision. Additionally, a formal complaint has already been filed with the Department of Human Rights. Our legal team will assist with the inquiry. We suggest you do the same." Rachel's jaw dropped. "Someone reported me to the government?" "Multiple people did," the director clarified. "And Mr. Walker himself has authorized full cooperation with the investigation." For the first time, Rachel didn't speak. She stared at the edge of the table, her breath shallow, her world collapsing in slow motion. "You'll be escorted from the premises," the HR director continued, "and your personal items will be mailed to the address we have on file. You are not to return to any Horizon property moving forward. Do you understand?" Rachel nodded once, tightly. She had no fight left. As she was led from the building, a few employees passed her in the hallway, but looked away. There were no whispered jokes now, no quiet support, only the echo of her own footsteps. At the same time, in a larger executive office just down the hall, Paul sat across from two senior auditors. One of them placed a copy of his morning incident report on the table. "This is your official write-up," the auditor said. "Your decision to authorize security intervention without proper guest verification violates 4 sections of Horizon's escalation protocol, including 2 tied directly to racial bias prevention." Paul tried to argue. "I was given incomplete information." "Rachel told me you didn't verify," the auditor interrupted. "You didn't ask Mr. Walker to explain his side. You didn't even scan the full reservation profile before making assumptions based on a name. That isn't leadership. That's complicity." Paul swallowed hard, his voice reduced to a whisper. "What happens next?" "Effective immediately. You are suspended without pay," the auditor responded. "Pending full review, you may face permanent dismissal. Until then, you are not to contact staff, enter hotel grounds, or make any public statements regarding this case. Do you understand?" Paul nodded slowly. "I do." He rose from his chair, his movements slow and heavy. As he left the room, he passed the lobby, where Marcus was speaking softly to a small group of housekeepers who had gathered near the concierge desk. They were smiling, nodding, their posture more relaxed now than it had been all day. One of them shook Marcus's hand. Paul turned away before Marcus noticed him, the weight of the moment pressing into his chest like a verdict he hadn't expected, but knew he deserved. Meanwhile, across the country, news anchors were already discussing the incident. Morning shows ran the headline: "Hotel chairman racially profiled in his own property." responds by freezing entire operation. Social media exploded with side-by-side images of Marcus, one captured from the lobby livestream, the other from a Forbes cover featuring him as America's quiet powerhouse. Commentators debated everything from unconscious bias in luxury service to the symbolic power of Marcus's restraint and response. Within 24 hours, the Department of Human Rights confirmed it had launched a formal investigation into Horizon Hospitality's employee training protocols. Advocacy groups reached out to Marcus publicly, praising his method of exposing systemic bias through transparency and accountability. A prominent civil rights attorney tweeted, "This wasn't just a story about a hotel. It was a mirror held up to corporate America, and it cracked." But Marcus, despite the growing national attention, never once changed his tone. He declined all press interviews. Instead, he focused on something else, the next steps for his people, both those who had failed him and those who had quietly, against the grain, done what was right. Upstairs in the private lounge, a team was already assembling new training modules, and a memo was being drafted to all Horizon properties titled, "From Compliance to Conscience, a new standard begins today." Marcus would sign it himself in ink. But before that, in the weeks that followed the now infamous Regency Fairmont incident, Rachel Whitmore disappeared from the public eye. The footage of her words, her demeanor, and her dismissal had gone viral in a matter of hours, igniting firestorms of think pieces, corporate backlash, and online fury. Her name trended on every platform, not with sympathy, but as a symbol of the exact kind of systemic arrogance Marcus Walker had exposed. Her inbox flooded with hate. She received dozens of messages from former colleagues, some angry, some disappointed, a few simply asking, "Why?" But Rachel had no answers, not at first. She stayed inside, turned off the news, and deleted every app she had once used to casually scroll through hotel trends and travel blogs. The silence she had once wielded to dismiss others now became her own punishment, loud, unrelenting, and impossible to ignore. For the first time, she sat with herself, not in defense, but in reflection. She read articles not just about the incident, but about unconscious bias, historical exclusion, and the cost of silence. She watched videos of other victims, other voices, other leaders who had faced what Marcus did and didn't have the platform or the power to respond the way he had. And then, one morning, she opened her laptop and began to write, not to defend herself, but to confront herself. The statement she posted was not crafted by PR, not filtered through legal teams, and not designed for forgiveness. It was raw, it was quiet, and it began with this. "For most of my life, I believed I wasn't the problem. I never said slurs. I never pushed anyone out of a room. I thought that was enough. But now I see that silence is complicity, and that assumption can hurt more than words. I thought I was being fair. But fairness without empathy is cruelty dressed as order. To Mr. Marcus Walker, I humiliated you. I made you feel less in a place you owned. And I'm sorry, not just for what I did, but for the thinking that led me there." She ended it with a vow to listen, to learn, and to change. She didn't expect applause. She didn't get much. But one comment stood out, buried deep in the thread of responses. It came from a verified account she didn't recognize at first. It said simply, "Acknowledgement is the first brick in rebuilding. Keep going." She clicked the profile. It belonged to Marcus. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Time would speak next. And it did. Months passed. Marcus returned to his work, expanding Walker International's equity initiatives, speaking at summits on leadership, and launching a new foundation aimed at combating workplace discrimination through immersive education. The hotel underwent a complete overhaul, new training systems, new leadership, new values posted not just in lobbies, but lived in halls. Meanwhile, Rachel did something no one expected. She moved cities, quietly. No interviews, no job hunting in hospitality. She enrolled in a night course on cultural literacy and volunteered at a local nonprofit focused on education reform. At first, she only helped with logistics, folding flyers, managing emails, organizing class materials. She didn't speak much. She listened. Gradually, she found herself sitting in on discussions, then moderating panels, then co-designing workshops on identity, respect, and systemic change. She wasn't perfect, but she was present. A year passed. One warm spring afternoon, the community center buzzed with energy. Parents gathered for a weekend seminar on inclusivity in education, and volunteers prepped coffee stations and printed name badges. Rachel, now wearing a simple navy blouse and jeans, helped set up a round table in one of the breakout rooms. As she adjusted the final chair, a shadow passed by the open door. She looked up and froze. Standing there in a charcoal gray suit with no tie was Marcus Walker. He wasn't surrounded by reporters. He wasn't flanked by executives. He wasn't there for judgment. He smiled gently. "I hear this program is doing good things," he said. Rachel swallowed hard, nerves and something else rising in her chest. "We're trying," she said quietly. Marcus stepped forward, extending his hand. "Thank you," he said, "for changing." Rachel took it. Her grip was firm, but her eyes glistened with unshed emotion. "I still have a long way to go," she admitted. Marcus nodded. "We all do. But you're walking it." Around them, kids ran past the hallway, laughing. A mural on the wall behind them depicted diverse hands lifting a globe. The moment was simple but powerful. No cameras, no applause, just two people, once on opposite sides of the same mistake, meeting again with understanding, not shame. Rachel exhaled. For the first time in a year, it felt like the weight had shifted. Not erased, but lightened. And Marcus, turning to walk into the main hall, knew that what had started as an exposure of injustice had grown into something far more lasting. A story not just of power, but of humility, accountability, and the quiet, determined choice to be better. If this story moved you, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss another powerful story like this one. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city or country in the comments. And while you're there, let us know what moment in this story hit you the hardest. Was it the moment Marcus revealed who he really was? Or the final scene of forgiveness and growth? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Your voice matters here.